this is Patty of Patty's Page, and today my guest is Pastor Ron Francis. Hello.
Hi, Patty. How are you today?
Do you want me to call you Pastor or just Ron?
Ron.
Ron?
Ron is fine.
Okay, the reason why I have brought you on my show today is because we are going to be talking about bioethics with stem cell and embryonic stem cell, the adult stem cell and embryonic stem cell. And I wouldn't mind knowing more about you as a person, where you were born and raised and how you got into bioethics itself.
Okay, well, you can probably tell from my accent, once you're from New York, you never lose that accent, it seems, but I've been away from there for a long time. I was born and raised in New York City and went to school in Arizona, Arizona State University in the Phoenix area, then went down to do graduate work in Tucson. Furthermore, I went on to pursue advanced work and graduated with a PhD in genetics. And in studying genetics, the primary emphasis was working with plants. We were studying cells and cell structure and everything else, and that's what sort of tweaked my interest in the way cells function and the entire life issue of in the plant kingdom, that is.
Yeah.
I accepted a position to Hawaii, and most of my friends at that time said, "How dare you go to Hawaii, that beautiful place." So went there and worked for a company for quite a few years, met my wife there, we were married there, our son was born there, and in 1980 felt called to go into the ministry, so my wife and 2-year-old son and myself, the three of us came back to the mainland and went to St. Louis to go to the seminary for 4 years. I was then assigned after graduating from the seminary to the New Haven area here, and I spent 21 years at St. Paul Lutheran Church in New Haven.
You still there?
No, I'm not still there. I retired a few years ago, and I'm now a member of Concordia Lutheran Church on Lake Avenue.
Oh, that's good. When did you start getting interested in the human stem cell research and stuff?
Not probably, but definitely while I was in Hawaii, there seemed to be a strong emphasis on abortion and the conflict with abortion, and became more active in studying that a little bit, and then of course went to the seminary and put that on hold because with all the studies I had to do, I had to concentrate on theology and areas associated with theology. Some of it ethics, but mostly the study of the original languages and some of the other facets of a 4-year study program. It wasn't really until I arrived in New Haven that felt very strongly led to work with the pro-life movement. My wife and I were very, very involved with that right shortly after we arrived.
That's good.
Went to a few of the earlier banquets that were dealing with pro-life, and that's when I became immersed in the subject of pro-life and all of what is entailed by life and what does life mean, and knowing full well that there were abortion clinics all over the country, and one very close to the library right here, right down the street on Webster. And so we took an active role in defending life, as they say, from the womb to the tomb after that point.
Undeveloped cells, that's the embryonic stem cell, isn't it? Explain more about that.
Well, with an embryo forming, once you have the union of the sperm and the egg, you have the development of the child. Now, we don't call it a child usually when it's growing at that stage, but nevertheless it is a child in every sense of the word, except that it has to mature and for sure grow massively in size. Those are cells that divide very rapidly, and very quickly they begin to what they call differentiate and are designated into different tissues, and before long, very soon after the embryo is formed, you start to have development of parts of the body, so to speak. For example, I'd like to share one thing, which I just became aware of recently. I asked the children one day in a class that I was leading, a chapel service over at Concordia, if they knew what to do after they finished a sentence. And I said, by all means, make sure you put a period at the end of that sentence. And I said, they are now able to pick up with some of the modern technology that we have, able to pick up a rudimentary heartbeat already at 21 days of
It's
age.
no bigger than the
and
size.
it's no bigger than the size of the pencil point.
Oh my goodness.
And that's really
It's alive.
was even a greater eye-opener for me, although I recognized that it was life right from the beginning as soon as conception took place. But it's just phenomenal how science is able to develop these things to pick up things such as
Can ultrasound pick that up?
Not at that
yet,
stage.
not at that
Ultrasound
stage.
will pick up things considerably later, but nevertheless they're able to pick up the different functions of the body. And of course, with the ultrasound, you have the camera as well, which is
So when can the ultrasound pick it up?
they've.
A month?
I can't tell you exactly when that would take place, but I would say probably a month and a half, they'd be able to pick up very well developed individuals, human beings.
Oh. Well, you have pictures here, embryonic.
Okay, let me, maybe I could best show you as we have a picture here, and then this will also kind of elaborate a little bit more on stem cells and just exactly what they are. Stem cells are really of two types. One are the embryonic stem cells, which are derived from an embryo after the embryo begins to grow and produces many cells, such as this second picture right here, which is a 3-day-old embryo. Then what they do to form embryonic stem cells, or the stem cells are already present, but what they begin to do is take these cells and excise them from the embryo, usually killing the embryo, and begin to grow them in a petri dish. And they, of course, will continue to divide very, very rapidly. Oh, thank you very much. In short order, you know, within 7 days, you already begin to have development of very rudimentary structures. And at this stage, they are able to take cells and grow them on dishes, petri dishes, and in certain types with a chemical background, and pull these particular cells out and grow them further, and they develop specific cells that they then use. These are stem cells that come from the embryo, which of course is the fertilized egg, and they begin to take that. Now they are also able to take cells and sacrifice the growing child from advanced children that are being developed. This is an embryo that is 4 weeks of age, and then this one is 6 weeks of age, and they are able to take cells from here as well and produce various what they call culture lines, development of cells which they hope eventually they can use to develop various tissues in the body.
And but that's not so. I mean, there's been indication that adult stem cell, since it's already fully developed in the cell itself, that can be used like from the umbilical cord,
yes,
or the skin or the
yes,
bone marrow, but from the embryonic cell itself, stem cell, there's been no evidence of anything being cured with it, by it.
Up to this point, there has been a great deal of research on both embryonic stem cells and what they call adult stem cells. Now let me just back up for a minute. An adult stem cell is a cell that is taken from a human being. That can be a baby all the way to a person who is much older in age. They use the word adult in contrast to the word embryonic because those cells are taken from embryos, preborn children. They have been able to work with those cells, and to this date, there has never been any evidence of a success rate with embryonic stem cells in helping out people who have very serious problems, or for that matter, even with some of the lower forms of animals, such as mice. There are a variety of reasons why that hasn't worked, and one of the things that is of great concern with those people who are involved with embryonic stem cell research is the fact that these cells are so spontaneous and divide and develop so rapidly that they get out of hand very easily, and often when they are injected in an animal, for example, that is having a problem, they will develop into tumors because they're so rapidly dividing. And so that is a very, very negative thing that could happen. You don't want that to happen to a human being. You don't want any embryonic stem cells produced at all and working with humans as far as I am concerned, because that gets into an ethical issue. But unlike the adult stem cells, they do not cause tumors in their further divisions. And that is a very, very important difference. With embryonics, with the adult stem cells, however, there have been many, many trials, and we are looking at enormous numbers of changes in bodies for the better, all types of activities that are going on to help improve the quality of life of those people who are suffering from diseases. Of course, most of this started when they were working with animals, mice and some of the other animals. But now they are actually working with stem cells in humans, and dramatic changes. Perhaps in a little while I'll show some pictures of things that have happened.
What part of the body does the adult stem cells come from?
Okay, I'm glad that you asked that, Patty, because you name it, you can get it from there. That's how wonderful that is. These are just some of the examples of where we're able to get stem cells and some of the work that they're able to do to further use these stem cells to work. You can get stem cells from bone marrow. That's perhaps the most frequently used area where they get adult stem cells, because the marrow is rich in dividing cells, and certainly the stem cells are there. Pardon me. The blood disorders are frequently, they work very well with the bone marrow transplants that you've probably heard of from time to time, and those are with stem cells, normally from the person who has it. Now, that gives one example of how much better it is, aside from the ethical area, to work with adult stem cells. If we're working with the stem cell from a patient's body and they inject stem cells into the area where there's some difficulty with the body, there's no rejection.
There's none?
No rejection, so there's no necessity to be taking anti-rejection medicine for the rest of your life should those cells be successful. Unlike with in many other things where you're taking stem cells from other human beings or even from non-humans, there's a tremendous amount of rejection that takes place, because that's the body's natural defense against any foreign substance, including human stem cells. So it's very important that we recognize that there's a decided advantage in using stem cells from the person who is suffering from the disorder, whatever that is. Now, going back to your question, we have bone marrow, and they have worked with cartilage. They are able to produce stem cells where they're able to work to help restore bone and cartilage and tendons, not to mention the problems with the blood, even working with nerve cells. Prior to studying this, I was always under the impression that that's the one cell that couldn't be reproduced. But that's not true, because they can indeed reproduce nerve cells as well, blood cells, heart and tissue cells as well. Another place where they are able to get stem cells from, and I think some of us would appreciate this a lot, is from fat tissue.
Oh, well.
So perhaps they'll be able to use someone's fat and be able to develop stem cells as a result of that, which would be very, very nice indeed. And they also work with to produce cartilage and muscle and nerves. Now, I want to clarify now that this is not a simple process. It takes the development of these stem cells and their nurturing so that they begin to what you call differentiate into cells that are eventually designated for heart or designated for lungs or whatever it happens to be. Going on with the various parts of the body, we have even hair follicles. They are able to get stem cells from. Hair follicles, places from the gastrointestinal area, they can pull stem cells out of, all the way down to the brain. There are parts of the brain that have a stem cell reserve. What they're finding out in this wonderful machine called the human body that our Lord has created, they're finding out that there are probably reservoirs of stem cells in every major part of the body. And so, which means that they can tap into every major part of the body to get stem cells to help
I have a
those
question.
individuals. Yes.
With the stem cells in the brain, now if there's a chemical imbalance in the brain, is there anything that a stem cell can do for the like a unbalanced chemical?
I'm not a doctor, so I can't specifically say with those things. That I'm more aware of major changes in structure as a result of the use of stem cells. However, the brain has an enormous number of nerve cells in it, and if nerve cells can be reproduced, then there's no reason why they can't be used to help to restore some brain activities, such as deficiencies or whatever.
You mean people with mental disabilities?
Mental disabilities, certainly. I could see that would happen down the road. Now, they don't have records of restored mental capacity that I have seen up to this year.
That is something to look into.
Oh, well, they are going to, believe me, because this is worldwide.
This is relatively new. How long has this been in existence, bioethics?
Well, bioethics deals with a lot of things, but when it comes to the ethical use of stem cells, that's probably come into the fore big time in the last 10, 15 years. I think since, and of course what has been the driving force in that is the fact that we have so many abortions and the needless killing of preborn children that has brought things to the forefront. And we cannot help but become political to a certain extent, because there are the people in Washington do the funding for certain types of research, and up until recently we have not been able to do embryonic stem cell research. Not we, but people have not been able to proceed with that except for very minimal areas. Stem cell research, that is adult stem cell research, is quite the opposite. There's been a lot of research done, and the beauty of it is that it isn't strictly limited to the United States, but Western Europe. All of the major medical areas in Europe are heavy into the adult stem cell research, as well as places in Asia and naturally in the United States as well. So it has become, the research is taking a full scope, a worldwide scope. Understand, however, that research requires a great deal of money, and it takes a long time to develop something before it goes from the clinical testing to the actual use in a human being.
Well, how long does it go? How much time does one cell that you're going to duplicate into, like, say it's a trachea?
Okay.
Someone had a tough time with that, maybe not grown properly or had it injured.
Well, cells grow very rapidly once they're in a proper environment, and then it takes the injection into the area where there is the weakness. For example, they have been able to take stem cells, inject them directly into the heart, and cause the start of development of normal cells, ultimately causing a repair, at least a partial repair in the heart. And you think of one of the #1 killers in this country and in the world is heart damage. And if they're able to do something like that, think of the wonderful way that we can restore a quality life to people without harming embryos, taking life to produce life, but rather taking adult stem cells from their body and injecting them into the heart. You mentioned the trachea because that to me, when I saw a picture, and these pictures come from Dr. David Prentice, who is probably the foremost expert on stem cells in the United States, if not the entire world. This man has devoted his entire life to that study. They have been able to successfully reproduce a trachea in a few cases now where that has meant life to the individual, or I should say a much greater quality of life, using stem cells and having them grow around the cartilage. Your trachea, of course, is the breathing tube.
So you have
Maybe
a
I
picture?
can show that. I have a picture here. A trachea is the breathing tube, and it consists of a lot of cartilage, but then there are a great many cells that surround that. And as a result of that, they were able to produce these cells in mass to literally make a new trachea. This trachea was, through surgery, was given to this woman, and she had total restoration of her breathing functions as a result of this. This, to me, is one of the most dramatic things I've ever seen, when they're able to produce a total trachea. And this was with adult stem cells. Keep in mind now, I'm speaking totally about adult stem cells and how they are able to use them. So we're talking from an ethical standpoint. What a blessing it is that God has given us these extra reserve of cells where we are able to go after diseases and malformations and all types of injuries. Another area which a lot of people have gained attention, it's gained a lot of attention over, is the area with spinal cord injury.
Oh.
Spinal cord injury is widespread, from a variety of areas. Much of it through automobile accidents, but through a lot of sports accidents and things like that, where people are paralyzed from the waist down.
Oh my.
And pardon me, I do have another picture of an individual who, young lady, beautiful young lady.
We're getting towards the end of our first half of the show.
First half of the show.
So would you like to come to another show with us?
I would be happy to do that.
And right now, we're going to cut short this interview, and he will come again the next time my show is on. So I know that you have a lot to talk about, and I am really interested because my mother's sister was an abortionist, and during the 60s and 70s. And she was a gynecologist as well. So I have a funny feeling that she did work with bioethics as well. This was in the 60s and 70s. We'll talk about that right after this show has ended and go to do another show. So
That would be fine.
thank you.
Thank you,
and,
Patty, very much.
We'll see you again the next show, and we'll talk more about this.
Thank you.
So thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
And this is Patty of Patty's Page. Thank you very much for tuning in. Pastor Ron Francis will be my next guest the next time we come on the air. So have a great day. God bless, and thank you for tuning in. Hello, Patty Hunter here again on Patty's Page. And to my right is Pastor Ron Francis.
Hi
my
again,
guest.
Patty. Good to see you.
And on my last show, we were talking about bioethics and stem cell, adult stem cell, and embryonic stem cell, and what each function each does. We were talking the last show about what? What were we talking about? Do you remember?
Oh, we were talking about a lot of spinal cord injury that takes place and paralysis, and there was one example I wanted to speak about a little bit more.
Oh, sure.
If we can do that.
Let's start.
Okay. I had put this up the last time we had a show, and I wanted to just elaborate on it a little bit. This young woman, very pretty young lady, 18 years of age, paralyzed from the waist down. And they began to inject the the adult stem cells into her spinal area, and fast forwarding the 6 months, here she is now walking with the aid of supports for her legs, growing stronger every day with a prognosis for a full recovery eventually. How ironic and how beautiful that is, that we can take cells from the human body and inject them in an area where there is a problem and have these miracles take place. To my right here is a fellow, and I know there's a lot of talk about Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's and tragic diseases that affect the brain in one way or another, and ultimately they affect the body. But this is a gentleman who was injected with adult stem cells and had quite a bit of slowdown, not cure, but a great deal of slowdown in the ravages of Parkinson's disease. With regard to Alzheimer's, there is not a lot of material on that yet, but for the number of people who are suffering from that disease now, and so many more coming on every day, you can be sure that they are going to be studying the effects of adult stem cells on that part of the brain where Alzheimer's is causing the deterioration. And I have no doubt in the world that down the road, however many years it might take, that they will be able to have some improvement with that disease as well, or regression of that disease, hopefully to the point where it totally is eradicated. But that's something we can't.
Yeah, because 3 years ago my dad had died of Alzheimer's, and I have been really interested in finding out how other people, I mean, we watched our father suffer with that, and it was not nice. And he turned from a very fine, intelligent, peace-loving person into a very violent, emotional, not remembering us anymore. And that just floored us girls, you know, when he died. So I'm interested in that type of adult stem cell research to help the physically ill. Now, you know, this physically getting new parts of the body with the stem cell. He reminds me of the lizards when they regenerate, you know, if they lose a limb. I wonder if we ever do that in the future, be able to get new limbs
probably.
Yeah.
They have been able to construct the entire portion. I believe it is the right side of the jawbone. And one of the problems that they have had up to this point has been when there is the development of the particular thing, mostly with cartilage and bone, it doesn't conform exactly to the size that they had hoped or to the shape that they had hoped. But this jawbone was developed for this young woman, and it was inserted in her after they were able to grow this jawbone outside of her body, and they actually planted it into her, and of course there was no rejection because it was her own stem cells.
It was her own
stem cells, and that was considered a dramatic first. Now, I know when I was growing up, I can remember working with plants a lot, and you know how you can take a plant, break it off, and root it as a cutting, or all the different things you can do with them, and some of the simpler forms of animal forms, such as the salamanders, or the frogs and toads, where they can grow new limbs and things like that.
And worms.
But for some reason, it seems as though that was not possible with the human. Maybe it's going to be possible, only we're going about it a little different way. We do not have the natural tendency to automatically grow something where we've lost it. And if that were the case in the future, what a blessing that we would have.
So that is ethical, that we can be able to regrow limbs.
There's nothing affecting the ethics of that. Basically, if we can go back to the ethics for a moment, why sacrifice a life for another life to improve the quality of that second life? Why do we need to take human fetal material or preborn material or those infants shortly after they are born and sacrifice them for the sake of the improvement of the quality of life of other individuals? That is the bioethical dilemma that we cannot tolerate for those of us who are pro-life. And so anything relating to that, I think, would be a blessing. The production of a new portion of a hand or even the improvement of a heart doesn't violate anything that is ethical or bioethical at all, in my understanding, not at all.
What about cloning?
Cloning is another matter. Cloning is a very interesting thing. That became rather famous, I should say, about 10 years ago when Dolly was produced from a clone from essentially the mammary gland of the mother.
It was a sheep, but
it was a sheep, right. And what they do, though, and this is where the problem comes in, they take the growing embryo and they take the genetic material out of that embryo and they inject other material which is either healthy or from another stock, whatever it is in the case of Dolly, and put it in the embryo, and then the embryo begins to grow. They're again playing around with embryology and playing around with growing life in this case it's a sheep, but nevertheless that's how it was produced. What happened as a result of that, though, was sad, because everyone thought, here's a way of cloning, taking exact replica of a human body, and they took the tissue of this one sheep and produced a sheep that was identical to that, the sheep they took the cell material from. The problem is there is an advancement of age to the point where this newborn sheep began to age much more rapidly, and within several years it was considered an old sheep already. So something happened where it was not possible.
So if you got it from the original sheep, which is about 7 or 8 years old, it won't be a young cell, really, as it grows. It's already from an old cell.
When it came to that type of an embryonic stem cell, they took a portion of skin from this older sheep and infused it into the embryo, however they do that with all of their special equipment and everything like that, and it did not last the cloning of this entire animal. Now, in contrast to that, when they have taken adult stem cells and, as I mentioned earlier with the repair of the heart, injected them into that heart, it literally reversed the deterioration of that part of the heart muscle to the point where it was literally young again. Now, that's with these special types of cells that we call stem cells. In the cloning of Dolly, for example, they're working with other types of cell material, and so it isn't necessarily, it isn't straight across the board the same at all. And so we would consider that to be a very ethical issue if they started doing the same thing with humans, because they're interrupting the egg and the embryo development to produce clones. I don't know why anyone would want a complete clone of himself or herself. I'm thinking of myself only, but it's...
I don't mind.
I don't particularly want another one of me floating around. Anyway, that's enough.
One's enough. One's enough.
Thank you. You're so complimentary.
I know. We love you. Question. You say the benefits of adult stem cell for human patients, like with cancer and that.
Yes.
I see a picture of a young...
I have a few pictures, and I will go over these very rapidly. This is an older woman who was treated with her own bone marrow adult stem cells. And the process, she had multiple types of cancer in the blood, and she was able to go from a very, very ill, dying woman into a person who was now able to enjoy life. And I love the shirt that she's wearing, Survivor of Adult Stem Cells Transplant. And so here she is, the living proof of that. An area where I think we have to look at very closely. For sure, we have adult diabetes. But then there's another type of diabetes, the early onset diabetes, the children's diabetes. That would be type 1 diabetes. And a lot of the young children are affected with it. It is growing enormously in the population pretty much all over the world. Two examples of younger men, teenagers, who received stem cells for the juvenile diabetes that they both had, this fellow on the left and then the one on the right. And they were totally released from any absence of the insulin that was necessary to help balance the sugar in their blood. And so they are both living examples of cured individuals.
Where did they get the stem cells from?
The stem cells came from their own bodies.
Was it from the...
Okay.
Okay.
In the particular case, the fellow on the right was bone marrow, his bone marrow cells, and the fellow on the... Both of these were from bone marrow transplants.
That's where basically the whole structure of a human being is, in the bone marrow.
Well, the bone marrow produces a lot of... very heavy in the production of stem cells. Because if you folks, if you are aware, especially Patty, but anyone, the red blood cells in our body are replaced constantly, the white blood cells, and they're constantly being renewed. And that all starts back at the point where at one time they were stem cells, and they went on to differentiate into red blood or white blood or some of the other products that you find in the blood, all types of different things. All are replenished. And so
does that include the skin? So how many skins have we had as you grew up?
Well, the skin would be a different area. The skin would be your skin cell. They have cells in the skin that are able to reproduce. And one of the things that they're finding out now, and I believe they were even doing this right next door at St. Joe Hospital, which has the burn unit. It used to be years ago they would take artificial skin and place it in the area where there was an extreme burn until the patient was able to eventually produce his own skin again. They are now able to develop that skin from adult stems from the same individual.
In a
And,
petri dish?
in the petri dish, and actually have these films that they graft on to the patient.
Well, how long does it
and
take to grow?
produce. I don't know I don't have the specifics of that, but I do know now with the advent of adult stem cells, they no longer need to go to other people's skin for grafting, but they can take that patient's own skin and do it where it's vitally necessary, and especially right away. Of course, they still do it's a type of a plastic that they lay over the wound to prevent any infection, because that's the biggest killer for people who are severely burned, is infection. And so they can work with a lot of people with burns as well. And I think, with this being in its infancy, the entire scientific area of working with adult stem cells, once they have established them, they will probably have adult stem cell banks all over the world. For example, right in a burn hospital, where people who perhaps have very, work in areas where they're more likely than not to have burns, that they can start to culture some of their cells right there, so that they always have them on file, so to speak. And so that's another thing.
I didn't mean to say that, but it sounded like logic. On file.
Right. We think of the movie, remember years ago, the television program, the $6 Million Man. Well, we're seeing that happen now, and in no way is that a violation of anything that is of a religious nature, or where you're saying we should leave Mother Nature do her own thing. Not necessarily, if we can restore the functioning of a body to what it was formerly, or to a portion of what it was formerly. I think that's a blessing from God. It's not anything that we're doing to hurt another individual. And in the case of preborn
just using
infants,
our own.
using our own tissue. On occasion, I will say that they have used other tissue from other individuals. Donors, yes. And it has worked fine, but there are two dangers. One of the chief one is the rejection, but then the second one is the continuous need for medicines all of their lives. However, they have also found that they can use tissue from other donors in some cases where there is no need for any rejection medicine, because there's something that's going on. They don't have all the answers, not at all.
Oh my.
So they don't have a lot of the answers. Okay, this is just a series of, they have spoken before Congress, and kind of tweaked the interests of some of the congressmen in past years, and people who are trying to earmark monies for adult stem cell research. And while that becomes a political football as well, it hasn't worked too successfully. But if they were ever able to do something like that, it would be wonderful. As it stands, some of the senators, this is a congressman, these are two congressmen who are there with these individuals who have been restored to health as a result of umbilical cord blood stem cells derived from there. And these young ones here are products of the success story that goes with that, from the variety of illnesses that they've had. There's one in particular that I would like to show you too. I know I've shown a lot of pictures. I don't want to.
Oh, that's great. I mean, a lot of illustrations helps to drive the point home. So
I remember reading about this particular type of a disease called stone disease, where people's bodies turn into stone. Now you can see a picture of this woman up at the top here. She was suffering, and it is a 100% fatal disease from the time it is diagnosed to the time where the person dies. Literally every part of the body, inside and out, begins to turn to stone. And she received adult stem cells, and her life, her life story has been written up. She's fine. She's doing well. She has some problems, but for the most part, she's living a quality life as anyone else is living as a result of that.
Stone stuff, this disease, it solidifies even the organs?
Yes, the organs are
the heart,
everything, from the skin all the way, the entire body, to the point where it eventually, you might say, freezes them to death. Not freeze, but just...
but the mind is still there.
Yeah, I'm sure it affects the brain as well eventually, but it's just a terrible disease. Not that prevalent, but nevertheless, they've been able to work with her, and she, you might say, had nothing to lose as a result of that.
Are they helping ALS as well?
ALS is being
MD,
worked with. I have a list of 4 pages of individual diseases that they are presently working with, and obviously I don't have the time to read all of these, but we're talking about tremendous different types of cancer, including breast cancer, which is, of course, we just commemorated the recognition of breast cancer research and had breast cancer survivors. But what a marvelous thing. Cancers of testicular cancer and skin cancer, ovarian cancer, brain cancers,
yes.
and all of the blood type of cancers that they've been able to work with.
Meaning leukemia?
Either total reversal of the disease, total cure, or at least putting the cancers in remission.
Which is good.
What I can say, and that's another one of the autoimmune diseases which are quite widespread. We're talking about rheumatoid arthritis in young children, and I mentioned already the type 1 diabetes. The area we know quite a few people, and I know Patty is familiar with one of them. He's a wonderful fellow, and he has multiple sclerosis. They have been able to start working on MS and trying to reverse the problems with that disease as well. Not only that, but many others. Cardiovascular, arterial diseases, decay of the arteries, and we have many people who have.
Yeah. My dad could have used it for coronary
artery disease.
Yes,
is widespread.
he had that. He died of that,
yes.
as well as Alzheimer's.
Another area of interest, and I know me personally, not that I have any particular disease, but my mom had glaucoma, and we have other diseases in our family. My wife's mother has macular degeneration. They are now working with some of the corneal diseases to try to regenerate the cornea to the point where the eye becomes totally normal again. A miracle. So, as I mentioned some of these diseases with all of sickle cell anemia in the black population, the African Americans, not just here, but those all over the world, is a dread genetic disease that they are able to work with and promote just wonderful results with that.
I have a question about the
yes.
lungs. I have a lung disease.
Yes.
It's moderate right now, but I am kind of curious, are they doing stuff to help the diseased lungs?
There is work with lungs, but I am not able to give you any results on that because I don't know, but I am sure they are working with that.
I hope so.
Yes, I'm sure you do.
I don't want us to come to it, so...
Yeah. Again, the injuries and the restoration of jawbone and limbs, reversal of limb gangrene for people who have advanced diabetes, and surface wound healings, just all types of, a lot of skull damage where they're able to repair the skull with adult stem cells. Just really do. And also have had some moderate success with some types of cirrhosis of the liver. And so you see really all parts of the body, the sky's the limit, as I said earlier, where they can do where they are doing research.
Because there's so many diseases out there right now that have no cure, like malaria and all that
yes.
that kill off young kids or over in the third world countries. And we have about a couple minutes left.
Okay. Let me just put one more picture up here. This is rather a dramatic picture. They have been able to take bone marrow cells directly and inject it in the bottom part of this patient's heart where the heart was dead. And miraculous as it is, new growth developed to the point where that heart was totally restored to normal.
So you took that from the bone marrow. That has every cell.
The bone marrow has an enormous number of cells, as we said already.
Yeah.
They do develop, and they eventually differentiate into different types of tissues. Well, they took some of the raw bone marrow cells, which included these adult stem cells, and injected into the heart, and they developed into heart tissue. That is
beautiful.
Science fiction. You'd think it were science fiction, but it's actually
not.
what's happening.
I mean, what we see in the movies a long time ago is coming to reality. Now we got about a minute or two left.
This final picture I am just showing you to, if you're able to hone in on that, some of the things that they have been able to do, more promising alternatives for treatment of some of the diseases with adult stem cells. Biomedical potential unlimited, able to cause a regeneration of virtually all adult types of tissues. They can multiply almost indefinitely and provide numbers of sufficient quantity to use for a variety of research things. See, keep in mind that the very great majority of tests that are being done now are clinical in nature. Am I pro adult stem cells?
Yes, you are pro adult stem cell,
I am.
and so am I.
Right.
And we're both pro-life. And I would like to thank you, Pastor Ron, for coming on to my show again and helping us get to know the difference between stem cell, adult stem cell, and embryonic stem cell.
Well, thank you.
We don't have to kill any newborn, I mean, not newborn.
New developing,
New
yeah.
developing embryos of human beings. We can use the adult stem cells, and that will be safe for everyone, and that can save lives.
And I thank you for the opportunity for being here too, and pray that the word gets out. You
Yes.
know, and that's the important
The
thing.
word will get out. I mean,
the word gets out.
shows like mine and others.
Yes.
they'll-
Thank you.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming to my show. Till next time, I'm Patty Hunter of Patty's Page, and thank you for tuning in to my show. And God bless, and have a great week. Thank you very much. Good day.